Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Learning and Growing webinar for supporting student success in virtual core requisite course. Our presenter today is Dr. Hadas of Avila University. My name is Sidra. I'm a member of the marketing team here at Hawks Learning. We'll have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions you have into the Q&A module as we go, and I'll go ahead and read them out at the end. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our lovely presenter for today. Go ahead, please get us started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this afternoon. I'm excited to share my experience and my passion with regards to Corequisite courses. I would like to start with a little bit of a background, and just give me 1 second. There we go. So in fall of 2017, that was actually the first semester that our math department offered courses using the Corequisite model. Up until then, we used the traditional developmental course sequence, meaning the traditional sequence of beginning algebra, intermediate algebra, leading all the way to college algebra. And starting from fall of 2017, based on students' placement score, they were either placed in a foundation level math course, which we call it math literacy, or a college level math course, or the college level math course with Corequisite. Fall of 2017 was also the first year that I joined Avila, and I received the opportunity to develop and teach these Corequisite courses. The inspiration for adapting this Corequisite model stemmed from our participation in the Math Pathways initiative of the Missouri Department of Higher Education. And of course, first year is always trial and error, and I learned a lot from the first year experience and made a lot of changes in the following years. Up until today, we are still, working on improving that model. The major change that we made after the first year was to actually offer the course to, so the course is actually servicing students that are taking multiple core math courses. So we have students that are taking statistics and the Corequisite. We have students that are taking college algebra and the Corequisite, and they're all together in the same section. So the goals for us for the Corequisite courses is, has three folds. One is to kind of make sure they stay on top of their weekly homework in the main course. And so we're kind of observing their progress on that. Second is, of course, to provide them help and support as they need it, in regarding to the content of the course. And the third one is to help develop growth mindset. So 90% of the time, actually, when students come into this, we call this course the Corequisite Mathematics Lab. And so 90% of the time, the students just come to the lab and they work on their homework in the main course. Now, the beauty of technology these days that we can check on the spot if students are actually active on the homework system, what homework they're working on. If they get stuck, we can see that, and so on. So, technology actually here is the key. Students that are having, issues, or students that come with a kind of a math phobia or lack of motivation, we emphasize that the learning process is important, and it's more important than their pre-existing knowledge and skills. And so we always encourage them to see math as in a different way, look at it as a tool to develop their brain and abilities, to solve problems, to think critically, and kind of become empowered individuals that engaged productively in society. And so to accomplish those goals, we use various tools. We post inspiring articles on our LMS platform. We post some videos, some assignment, like reflection assignment and discussion assignments. We facilitate time management workshop, and I personally also do stress management workshop. and I even lead meditation because I have that kind of a background. So pre-COVID, we basically, all the classes were face-to-face. Students were coming into computer labs. They were instructed to work on their homework in the main course. I would walk around or use the teacher station to see what they're doing in their screens. Those that needed help, I would stop by and help them by writing problems on their papers or whatever. And I would assign for them an attendance grade based on their engagement in their math homework and activities. And I have to admit that I kind of had a kind of a police mentality of, are they working on their homework? Are they not working on their homework? What are they doing? Are they using any of those? I don't remember the name of that app, but there are apps that help solve problems for you. So I was kind of having that police mentality. That was pre-COVID. And then when COVID started and we all went online, basically, there was clear indication of inequity of connection, or inequity in students' access to high-speed internet, and so on. I'm sure you guys know that. And on top of that, students also experienced and us too, experienced the pandemic. And so all of these challenges kind of led to a new way. And that new way is, again, use of technology tool. So again, we use the access to the instructor side of the homework platform to see if students are actually active and working on on their homework. We can see which homework they're at, when was their last login, how long they've been active, and so on. In addition, when students are having issues, we share a screen of problems and also a snipping tool and screenwriting. I love this tool. This is my best friend here when I'm teaching. Now, in the beginning, I used different techniques of breakout rooms. In the beginning, the very first, semester when we went online, I used to place everyone in his own breakout room and kind of hop between the rooms, check on them, have a little conversation, help with whatever they had issues with, and so on. Next semester, and then some students commented that they felt kind of like isolated, and so that made me realize that individual breakout rooms are not the best approach here. And so the next semester I tried a few things. Sometimes I would put students in breakout rooms of 2 or 3 and encourage them to interact and collaborate with each other. And this technique definitely helped create a sense of community within the class dynamic. This past semester or this past year, I actually, most of the time, I kept everyone in the main room and I just communicated with them over the chat. So they were instructed to work on their homework in their main course and to write private message to me, a report on what homework they're working on. And then I validated it on the instructor side. When I saw students that are getting stuck on a few problems, I reached out to them. I put them in a breakout rooms. We worked on a breakout room. We worked on problems together. Sometimes before exams, we would do an exam review together. I would share my screen, write on it, and so on. I have to admit that the first fall semester, fall of 2020, when everyone was in lockdown, most students that showed up were actually engaged. They were they were wanting the help, they were wanting the conversations, and they were actually engaged. Last semester, which was last fall of 2021, which was the first semester that we were kind of in hybrid mode. Some students were on campus already taking, classes in person, but still the lab was offered online. Not everyone was engaged. And actually that was the first semester that we've seen a kind of a spike in the fail rate in the lab. This past spring semester, we actually had one section of the lab online and one section in person. And I have to tell you that the online section was amazing. The students were engaged, they were productive. You could see that they really used the time during the lab to really work on their homework and progress in their courseware in the main course. Now, students that had some technological challenges like bad internet or complicated study settings, throughout the pandemic and even this past year, I introduced what is called an optional attendance assignments. So in the lab, 20% of the grade is actually awarded for them for showing up to the class and doing their work, right, in homework in their main course. And to allow for flexibility, I introduced attendance assignments. So students that couldn't show up to the class, or they showed up and the internet dropped, or they had to leave early or something like that, they were able to submit an attendance assignment in which they were asked to provide kind of an outline of the major topics they learned in their main math class that week, and what topics they particularly were challenging for them, and how they overcame that challenge. It was like short, instructions were short assignments. And they also were asked to provide an example of one problem for their homework and their detailed solution. So that way I could see that they were, I could verify on the instructor side of the homework platform that they actually did their homework, that they actually are staying on top of what they need to do in their main math course. But they also were engaged with me by showing me, okay, these are the topics I learned, these are the topics I had challenges with, and this is how I overcame them, and this is how I solve my problems these days. So, for me, the main thing with the lab classes is that I really show up authentically. At the beginning of the class, or at the end, I kind of have a short conversation with them about their motivation, how to achieve growth and success in class and in life in general. As I mentioned, I do a time management presentation with them, but we really talk about, in that presentation, we really talk about their goals in life and how to set goals and how to set priorities, and kind of empower them to think about their classes, not just as classes that are counting towards graduation, but as classes that are counting towards their knowledge, their intellectual abilities, their thinking abilities, and so on. And I personally empower them to look at their education process as an ongoing process of growth. Just like myself, I share with them that the process of learning and growing must be always accompanied with willingness to make mistakes, to be open to feedback, and to really have a desire to improve. I share kind of my own continuous process of growth as an educator. So some of the things that I wanted to check, does that actually work, right? Does that really work for students? And so I did look at some data, and some of the things that I looked at, well, basically I looked at data from fall of 2018, which was the second year that we implemented the current model that I shared with you. And until all the way to last spring. I didn't get a chance to integrate the data from this year, but I can share some of it. And there were about 319 total students. About 87% of them were enrolled in the Corequisite course. And some of the things that I looked at was, I was interested to see, is there any difference in the DFW rate in the main course pre and post COVID? So I wanted to see, does the lab actually help students, pass their main course within one semester and move on with their degree? And the other things that I looked at was kind of looking at the grade distribution again, pre and post COVID, examine some correlation between Corequisite enrollment and some demographic factors. I was just interested about that. And, the evidence was clear that, there's, beside the effect of the pandemic on students' overall success and, retention, with regards to the math, there was not so many differences. So as you can see here in the bar graph and in the p-value here, there's not much of a significance in the grade distribution pre and post COVID. And again, I'm looking at the percentage of A, B, C, D, and F and W overall. And this was actually true regardless of students that were enrolled in the Corequisite or not. So in other words, if I took only those that were in the Corequisite, I would get the same kind of distribution of grades. Of course, with a much lower count of students in those. And the other thing that I looked at was to see the percentage of DFWs, again, in the main course, in their either college algebra or statistics, or we had another course that we're kind of phasing out of it, which is application of college math or mathematical reasoning. And over there as well, there were not that, there was no significant difference. I mean, you can see the numbers here, but there was no significant difference in their percentage of DFW pre and post COVID. And again, this was regardless of enrollment in the Corequisite. The last thing, one of the last thing I looked at was whether or not there was a significant correlation between Corequisite enrollment and gender. And surprisingly, there were about the same percentage of females and males in the Corequisite. And again, this was true pre and post COVID, as you can see on the graph. And regarding ethnicity, we have seen again similar distributions. You can see that there is a much smaller population of those that are in our institution that are not taking the Corequisite as opposed to those that are taking the Corequisite. But there was actually no correlation between the enrollment and ethnicity, as you can see. And again, this was true pre and post COVID. So I think that's about it. That's what I have to share. But the main point, guys, is the Corequisite courses actually help students succeed and complete their math course within one semester. Using virtual settings works as well. We, as I said, using breakout rooms, using chat options, screen sharing, snipping tools, looking at the instructor information in the homework platform that you're using to verify if students are active or not active, how they're progressing with their homework, and where they get stuck, and you can offer their help, and so on. So that's it. Thank you. I see there are some questions.
There are. So someone was asking, what technological tools can you use? If you can provide some examples.
So we use, so the homework platform, homework platform that we use is an adaptive system. And that's an adaptive system. The beauty of it, and Hawks, I believe, have that option as well, is that the system kind of identify knowledge gaps. And what it does, what are kind of adapt the questions that students are being presented with in order to help them achieve the learning objective of a particular homework. And so that's one of the tools that we use here. Again, in a virtual setting, in the beginning of I use a lot of polls with the students to check in with them. Do they want to work in groups? Do they want to work individually? Before test, again, the same thing. I use polls. Do you want to do a test review together? Do you want to do test review in groups, and so on? So Zoom polls were great aid for me. I use them almost every semester, every class, sorry. I hope that answered your question.
Perfect, thank you. There's another question. Did you look at the success correlations for ethnicity groups using the Corequisite course?
Yes, so I use both Corequisite and overall. So like my last slide there actually show that this was overall, but I did check. You know what? don't think I looked at it, and if I did, I didn't put it on the slides here. But it's a good point. Thank you.
Okay.
One thing I can share with you guys is I did look at the, the success in the Corequisite themselves over those, 6 or 7 semesters, pre and post COVID, regardless of the main course. So just like the failing rate in the lab, and I did notice that the spring of 2020 and fall of 2020 were actually had a spike in the students that failed the labs, and consequently, if they failed the lab, they also failed the main course. Actually, this semester, or starting this summer, we changed our course policies and to allow students to test out of the lab in the middle of the course. So after 8 weeks or 4 weeks in the summer, students that have at least 80% average in their main course and at least 80% average in the lab course, because the lab has 50% of the grade is awarded for them for doing their homework on time in the main course, and would achieve at least an average of 60%. And I could see that sorry, what I was talking about. Sorry, I was talking about the changing policy. Sorry, excuse me. So if student had a grade in the lab of 80% or higher and grade in the overall course, they're actually able to test out of the lab in the middle. So this is a change we're applying starting this summer and moving on to the fall. And so what I was going to say before is that the failing rate for spring 2020 and fall 2020 were really high, were higher than the rest. Overall, it's about average of about 20% of students that are enrolled in the lab and not passing it. And mostly it's those students that also, fail their main course as well.
Got it. So, one other question. Have students been more or less engaged since the transition to online environments?
Yes, so surprisingly, in the fall of 2020, where everyone was in lockdown, most students were actually engaged. So I would at least once a week have a one-on-one conversation with each of them, and they were engaged. If they had struggled, they shared that they're struggling. Now, in fall of 2021, I have seen a little bit of a decline, meaning because that was the first semester that students were also taking in-person classes. So you still had those students that logged into the Zoom, but they were doing something completely different. But those that showed up were actually very engaged. And as I mentioned, this last spring, they were very, very engaged. Like you could see that they're reporting what they're working on. They're reaching out when they have questions. They're reaching out if they need a review on something, and so on. So yeah.
Perfect. During live classes, what do you do to engage with students?
So like I said, I use a lot of Zoom pools, like to check in with them, their status on their weekly homework. Are they almost done, completely done, need some help, and so on. So I use a lot of Zoom pools. I mentioned I use breakout rooms where I chat with students, and just the chat itself, I engage with them on the chat. I let them do the work, and then if I log on to their account on the homework platform and see that they're stuck on a problem, I chat with them on the chat. Do you need help? I see that you're stuck on this topic. Do you want a review? And surprisingly enough, students are engaging and responding because it's a private message. I send private message to them on the chat. So
That's awesome. What placement system do you have in place to determine which students need to enroll in the co-requisite course?
Okay, I love this question. So right now, actually starting in spring of 2020, we went test optional. So students that are coming in they do have ACT, SAT scores, we would use those for placement. Students they don't have students that don't have ACT or SAT, the traditional test, we use a placement, AccuPlacer, a placement test for that. And we kind of classify the categories of, when they need to go into math literacy, which is the lower level, which is one semester course, kind of just to prepare them for the college level course, college level with the lab, or college level directly. And the truth is that I'm actually working on part of my research is looking at multiple measures that multiple measures for placement that not just look at their GPA, but their high school GPA, highest level of math class they took, some math aptitude score, some perseverance score, and math scale and math value. So this is in the work, and my goal is by the spring of next year to have a system in place, for a better system of placement in place that looks at all the things that I just like more holistically of the student rather than their AccuPlacer score.
That's fantastic. We do have one last question. I'm not sure if you covered it or not, but how many students, or roughly what percentage of students enrolled in the co-requisite course fail it and need to repeat the main course?
Okay, that's a great. So as I said, I can share an Excel spreadsheet, but I'm not going to. We have about, so in fall of 2020, there were about 20% that failed the lab and had to repeat. But usually the students that failed, if they failed the main course, they failed the lab. And up until last semester, if they failed the lab, they also had to fail the main course. So we have an average of about 20% overall that don't fulfill the requirement to pass the lab and the main course, and they need to repeat it.
Gotcha. If there are any last questions, go ahead and put them either in the chat or the QA module. I'll give you guys a minute or so to populate any last questions.
And as I mentioned, this is like an ongoing process of growth, right? So every semester we're examining new things that we can do. As I mentioned, we are changing the policies of adding an option to opt out. We're also looking into possibly adding sections that students that place right into the main course, but don't do so well, to add the lab in the middle of the semester. So we are exploring all of that as an ongoing process.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think that looks like all the time we have for questions today. Thank you so much, Dr. Haddis, and thank you all for attending today. If any of you or your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, go ahead and please submit your proposals to the Learning and Growing website, which I'm going to go ahead and link in the chat down here below. If you have any questions, please email them directly to us. We'll email you guys a link of the recording today once the webinar is available, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.